While reading the new Sunrise on the Reaping book, besides some other dynamics, something became very, very clear to me. Within the original trilogy of the Hunger Games, we were very much aware of how the world of Panem, and especially the capital, engages in propaganda to make sure that the districts remain complicit and in a constant state of fear. And yet, in Sunrise on the Reaping, Suzanne shows us and sheds light as to how deep this rabbit hole truly goes. And so it leads me to wonder about how much propaganda really controls the narrative, how much propaganda really controls the world of Panem, and how much propaganda really controls us today as a society, and what conclusions Suzanne is trying to make through her work of literature. So I thought we'd talk about it. It's no secret that Panem follows a totalitarian regime with some fascist elements. The capital exercises absolute control over every single aspect of the people in the district's lives, economically, via communication, law, speech, etc. Engaging in fascist themes with that of ultranationalism, authoritarian leadership, and suppression of dissent. And it also has a small elite of people that control all the resources and power and have it at their disposal. Very similar to a lot of elements that we've seen in the world today. According to Suzanne Collins, her reason for the original trilogy was that when she was scrolling through television and she saw the Iraqi war being broadcast live, and she had an inspiration to write this book. But when you look at the reality, in that very singular moment, people's deaths were being broadcast for others' entertainment, and these types of historical events have been universally accepted, and that is very much through nationalism and propaganda and more elements. And the first thing that Suzanne Collins points out, especially through the world of Panem and how they use propaganda, is censorship and the control of the narrative. It is no secret that in the original trilogy, within the games, for example, any sort of unwanted behavior or rebellious behavior would always be cut out of national streaming when it came to the Hunger Games, so no one could actually technically see what was going live. Couple that with the fact that on a daily basis, anything that was on television was most likely propaganda, always broadcast to the districts. There's actually some clips of this online in which you guys can see, which shows you the types of films that they would broadcast to all the districts, giving this sort of unified nationalist look about how these games and how the totalitarian world of Panem was for the greater good and was for general peace, which we all know was an absolute lie. But when you're constantly fed day and night these sorts of clips against your own will, at a certain point, especially if you're born into this kind of system, one can be susceptible to believing such a thing. These clips would be broadcast everywhere at every time. But we also know that in the original trilogy, in the book Catching Fire, Katniss, when she goes over to the mayor's home and goes to visit, she sees that he has a completely different television screen available to him in which he can see footage of the districts rebelling. And yet this information is never broadcast to the districts themselves, because the capital knows that showing such information, showing such activities would rile up the other districts, and that there is power in communication, there is power in numbers. But once again, you see this sort of elite / oligarchy in movement. It's only a select few that are allowed to know the truth. It is only those within the government that are allowed access to what is actually going on within the world of Panem, and they must always present a form of perfection to let others believe that there is nothing wrong with the system that they are currently in. In Sunrise on the Reaping, this goes 10 times even deeper. The first thing that immediately alarmed me was that in the early chapters in the books, when Drusilla starts speaking for the first time and Plutarch is the one who's in charge of getting the footage, we immediately understand that there is actually a 5-minute delay when it comes to live broadcasting. This sounds like such a small detail, but the thing is that in those 5 minutes, Plutarch was able to completely change the narrative by not broadcasting the actual events live. And so what they did is that instead of showing what actually happened, they reshot the tapes and broadcasted it as if Haymitch was originally reaped the right way, which was completely false. But it's kind of scary how that one singular small tiny little detail makes a huge difference. When it came to Haymitch's actions in the games, all of his actions within the games were completely erased. Not one singular scene from him rebelling yelling or screaming or reacting was shown, and rather everything was edited to make him seem like a sort of jackass, rascal, and all the deaths that were as a result of the rebellion or him trying to destroy the arena were completely wiped away from the public's memory. It's even more sad when you get to the trilogy and you realize that Peeta and Katniss watched this tape, but they themselves sees Haymitch within that same persona, not knowing the depths of what Haymitch went through within those games. So when we get it from Katniss's point of view, she notices how his persona was very much of the rascal, and we just believe it because this is what has been shown to us, not knowing the deep trauma, the lies, and everything that has been edited out of the footage. I think in this way, Suzanne holds up a mirror within her books to show us just how easily things can be manipulated, how things can be censored, and how things can be altered within media, and how much it truly affects us and our conscious and what we believe is real or not. You see these parallels in a lot of other totalitarian countries like North Korea, Russia, and even recently in the US, there have been some very alarming tape that people have started recording on their televisions, not to mention the rumored censorship on Facebook, TikTok, and other social media platforms that we use. There is a complete censorship taking place even in our world today. And with a lack of information, how are people supposed to react or know what to do before it is too late? And I think that is the first thing that Suzanne is trying to point out to us through this book.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, it's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
The second problem is the erasure and rewriting of history. Another alarming thing that comes through the book of Sunrise and the Reaping was the seemingly seamless erasure of Lucy Gray Baird and the 10th Hunger Games. The 10th Hunger Games were extremely pivotal into how the rest of the Hunger Games evolved. Firstly, it was Snow's inclusion in the Hunger Games and the first time where his ideas were incorporated into the Hunger Games themselves. It wasn't until Snow came in and after the 10th Hunger Games made it into an entertaining spectacle that the Capitol started to tune in, and they changed the narrative by making the Capitol believe that it was for the greater good. The problem is that within the same games, the erasure of Lucy Gray Baird is one that is extremely concerning. So much so that her own district doesn't even know her full name generations later. While other districts get to remember their victors, when it comes to Lucy Gray, the Capitol pretends as if she never existed. And what is also concerning is that when Haymitch, Mags, and Wiress are talking about previous victors, when it comes to District 12, the Capitol has told people that 10th Hunger Games were really badly filmed and they weren't a spectacle, so it wasn't important for the victors to rewatch those games. The problem is that this is an absolute lie. The 10th Hunger Games were full of spectacle because Lucy Gray was a very, very different victor that the world of the Hunger Games had never seen. But seemingly by telling people that it was not worth their viewership and erasing Lucy Gray's memory and also editing the clips, they made it seem as if Lucy Gray's whole entire hard work and survival in the games was not really worth anyone's time, despite it being a monumental moment in the world of Pan Am, or in Pan Am's history. By erasing her from District 12, they also erased the rebellious spirit that is very existent within District 12, keeping them complacent. And you can see that by not even acknowledging the first ever victor, District 12 is kept at a perpetual and constant loss when it comes to the other districts. Districts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that are closer to the Capitol and our careers are well praised and shown as the golden children within the games, despite still being victims of the same slaughter. So their games get broadcast and their victors are well known. Yet District 12 is never praised at all, nor is the truth ever broadcast to the districts itself. Because the Capitol and Snow is very aware that if such games were ever to be displayed, they know that this would spark hope within the districts. This would spark something that they do not want to happen. And it's kind of scary, and it makes you wonder how much of our reality and our history has been erased. When we as adults in the current world today find out information that was kept from the public due to media censorship or just simply rewriting history, it's concerning. And it's also concerning to see how much of us as a population of people within different countries have taken in this information that is being rewritten as fact. This sort of parallel can be seen in our world today, is actually trying to ban books, ban very important books of literature that teach us the different parallels of what is going on in our society and how to avoid them. When I saw that The Handmaid's Tale was on a banned book list, I knew that there was a bigger problem at hand, because in the world of The Handmaid's Tale, and comment if you guys want me to ever do a breakdown on The Handmaid's Tale, because I've seen it all before. But in the world of The Handmaid's Tale, Gilead is built upon this so-called Christian nationalist society. And what they do is that they claim that they are doing this for God. They even use pseudo-Christian terms, which are not really Christian, but that's another video for another time. And they manipulate people and say that this is the way that God intended things to be. But at the same exact time, the Bible is actually banned from people to be able to read, because if people read the real Bible, they would know that this is not correct. It's these sort of weird forms of manipulation that we see happen in our world and societies today. And while I personally don't have all the vocabulary and the words and the expertise to break it down, I do see the parallels that Suzanne is pointing out. And with all this evidence in history, it's no wonder that Suzanne was able to write a book, because in this situation, art definitely imitates life. Another concerning thing that is pointed out in Sunrise and the Reaping as a form of propaganda are the slogans. One of the slogans that were written in the Capitol was "No peace, no prosperity, no Hunger Games, no peace." Another form that is connected with this is the character of Effie Trinket. So I bring up these two case studies because I think they work hand in hand. By saying no peace, no prosperity, no Hunger Games, no peace, Capitol is directly linking the peace of the Capitol to that of keeping and maintaining the Hunger Games. Without the Hunger Games, there is no peace, and no peace brings us no prosperity. The thing is, these are only shown within the Capitol, telling you how easily the Capitol has brainwashed its own citizens into believing that the Hunger Games were for a greater good, for a greater sacrifice. And we see the unfortunate example of this with Effie Trinket. When Effie comes into the book of Sunrise on the Reaping, and she helps out Hamish with his outfits, she is so close to be able to relate with him on such a good level. She understands that this young boy, who is still a child, by the way, has been put into a very difficult and unfortunate position. And while you think she's about to sympathize with him fully and they're about to bond, she says something. She says something along the lines that the games are definitely for a greater good. And in that moment, Effie Trinket loses you, because you realize that even though she wants to have empathy and sympathy for Hamish, in which she does, her empathy and sympathy is limited to what she has been taught as a child. And in her brain, she truly believes that this is the best way to go, because that's all she's ever known. She has been truly misguided, and that is because of all the propaganda that she has learned as a child, probably through schooling and probably through all the programming that is sent, whether through television, whether it's through the posters or every form of media that she has consumed. She truly believes that this is a good way to maintain peace, and this is the only way. I pointed it out in my last video that with this rationale, for example, we can look back in history for. What is concerning is that heinous acts against humanity and mankind have been performed with everyday people believing that it was truly for the greater good. We can take it back to the times of slavery where people actually believed that it was okay to own slaves and that this was a normal state of life and that in itself was for the greater good. And that was how African people were supposed to be. It sounds delirious and absolutely strange, and it is now, but there was a certain time where that sort of ideal and thinking was generally accepted. We saw it within Nazi Germany, where these people truly believed that what they were doing, killing, endangering, hurting, and destroying innocent people and children, was for the greater good within Nazi Germany, and it was not. We see that constantly within also totalitarian regimes as well, where the propaganda is so steep that they make their citizens believe, or they try to make their citizens believe, that this is the only way, when it's simply not. And this, coupled with the fact of rewriting history, makes it all the more effective. Another thing that adds to this layer is the restricted access to knowledge. I think this is also something that Suzanne constantly points out to us in Sunrise and the Reaping. The districts are denied information and a proper education outside of what they know within the districts. We saw this within the trilogy where Katniss talks about that how once you become a certain age, you are taught how to, whether it be in the mines or coal mines or work that is specifically around District 12, but you are also never taught about the other districts besides basic information that you overhear from other people. This restricted knowledge makes sure that every single person within their own district cannot connect with another district. They are sort of kept in these strange cages with restricted access and information. So even though these people are all being oppressed at the same time, they themselves cannot communicate with one another easily. By also making sure that every single district is focused on one united goal and one united sort of working force, it does not allow these people to think for themselves or think of alternative ways of living. As we all know that once you have access to information, you can make more informed decisions. In the beginning of the Sunrise of the Reaping book, we see Lenore Dove in a tree with a book. Now, to me, initially, this was very much normal until I realized that having access to a book in District 12 was extremely difficult and also extremely expensive. And the books that the districts were able to have access to tend to be more fairy tale-like rather than books on politics and history, which I find was a very interesting detail. Because when we see Plutarch later in the book, Plutarch has access to a whole entire library of different sorts of books. Plutarch, funny enough, asks Haymitch if he likes to read, and Haymitch says it's never really been his thing. And he agrees that it's never been his thing either. But he also states that the capital themselves are also fairly ignorant people. They do not choose to read, they do not choose to give themselves or acquire themselves with more information because they are comfortable. They're within a comfortable space, they're within a comfortable circle, and as long as they're fed, kept well, and they're on the better side of this system, they do not care enough to know other things or know things beyond what they need to know. Here you see two forms of restricted access. So for Haymitch and for the districts, people are not allowed access to general history or knowledge because the capital knows that this would inspire ideas within the districts, something that they clearly do not want. They want the districts to be focused on one form of work to supply the capital with everything that they need. Educating the districts would bring problem for the capital's ideals, so instead they don't, and they restrict access and they keep people simple and uneducated. On the opposite side, the capital that has all the access to all the information that they could possibly want are fed to remain ignorant. The capital, despite having the access to the books, do not willingly engage to have all this knowledge. They are kept also in a state of, should I say, hedonism, in which they are so focused in their own pleasures and wants and needs that they do not care for the other needs of the other people because they don't have to. They live in such a system that benefits them, and so it is not necessary. But I also think that those in control in the world of Panem also ensure that the people in the capital are not aware. By making the Hunger Games rather as entertainment, they keep the capital complacent. They keep them entertained. They make them feel like they are a part of the game so that they can actually care. This was something that was discussed in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, where the capital originally thought that this idea was just distasteful and abhorrent, but it happened anyway. And then when Snow came with ideas to get the Capitol more engaged and people started betting, then the Capitol felt akin to what was happening. And once they realized they could benefit from the games became their own spectacle of themselves. By making sure that people and the masses are entertained, the Capitol keeps its regime. The Capitol keeps its power. That's the most important part. So that there are only a few people within the Capitol themselves that could ever think of rebelling. You see the same thing with Sejanus Plinth in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Because Sejanus has originally come from another district, he is well aware of what is happening within the districts versus what happens in the Capitol. So when he sees the atrocities, he reacts and he screams and he voices his discomfort. But every time he is always stopped by Snow or by somebody else, because once again, making sure that even within the Capitol, people are kept blind and entertained is the most important goal. One could draw parallels to how our real life works. With Hollywood and entertainment and also social media platforms that we have access to, one could very much argue that these things keep us as people placated and complacent. One could also argue that despite previously having access to knowledge, we have not taken advantage of the access of knowledge that is available to us. And finally, another aspect is the dehumanization. The propaganda has been so effective to make the Capitol believe that these districts are beneath them. These districts of real life working people are beneath their social class. Capitol citizens treat district children that have done absolutely nothing to them like vermin. Drusilla in the Book of Sunrise and the Reaping calls the districts a bunch of piglets and doesn't find any discomfort in quote unquote shooting them down or killing them, because they have so much dehumanized the districts and the people who live in the districts as just something that is expendable and their lives are not worth it. By dehumanizing these children as animals and quote unquote piglets, it makes it a whole lot easier for people in the Capitol to excuse the Hunger Games, to be able to excuse it because, oh, they're different from us. They're not the same. They are not like us. And I feel like this same rhetoric and this same form of reasoning is how a lot of tragedies in humanity have been able to occur, by making the other group, who are also human beings, seen as the enemy. This theme is also continued in Nazi Germany, other horrible regimes, by othering people who are human beings who deserve to live their lives, who deserve not to be murdered or face genocide. But by dehumanizing these ordinary people and making them to seem grotesque or non-human, it allows us to also excuse not having empathy for others. We see this all the time when it comes to forms of immigration, to excuse the mistreatment of people who are either illegal immigrants or undocumented, by making them seem as the other or the enemy, or as the sole problem that is causing effects to the economy or the country's well-being, even though that is not the object truth. This method of reasoning, unfortunately, is very successful when it comes to manipulating a mass of people to believe something. Same can be said for the Israel versus Palestine, in which you can see that this is a clear genocide, but because there is a reasoning that these people are othered from us, these people have taken something from us, these people are our enemies, this is our right, the same sort of horrible acts are also excused. And I think with this book, Suzanne is calling this out and trying to show this to us, how this sort of reasoning allows human beings to excuse grievous acts. If anything Sunrise on the Reaping has taught me, is to constantly question the narratives that we were fed. Otherwise, we risk becoming the Capitol citizens, complicit, complacent, and completely blind to injustice. That was heavy. Anyways, you guys tell me down in the comments what you guys would like me to speak about next. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, bye.